Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on rethinking artist selection processes and program evaluation strategies, specifically for artist residencies. This is a bit of a bonus material for those that are watching us or attending the conference online, and I appreciate you might have felt very far away from the actual auditorium itself. So hopefully you feel like this is a bit more interactive and engaging. My name is John Opie, and I'm new head of artist support at ACME. I'll be taking on responsibility for its awards and residencies, which involves various artist selection processes. I'll also be looking at ACME's evaluation processes to help us understand further value of its various support activities for artists and improve the quality of its experience for artists in the future. Previously, and until the end of July, I was Deputy Director for Gerald Arts, which is an independent UK-based funder offering direct funding opportunities for artists and working with arts organisations to create meaningful development opportunities for artists that would result in their learning, career development, and help them to make new artworks. As you might guess, artist selection and evaluation was integral to this work. I'm delighted to be joined here by Victoria Tillotson and Valentina Oru. Can I ask my colleagues to introduce themselves? Victoria, do you want to go first? Oh, no sound. Okay. I'll ask Valentina if your sound is working to go first. Victoria.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I have sound. Okay. I can go first while Victoria sorts out her sound. Yes, hi everybody. My name is Valentina Oru. I'm an evaluation consultant and a researcher. I've been working in the UK arts and cultural sector for a while, working in artist support programs and learning programs. So I'm a researcher. My area of interest is looking at models of cultural production and also the relation between visual arts practices and the economy. And in my research and evaluation practice, I'm interested in creative research and evaluation methods, which I'm going to talk about more later.
Brilliant. Thank you, Valentina.
Thanks.
Victoria, do we have sound?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, clearly couldn't work those other headphones. Call myself somebody who works for an art and tech organisation. There we go. So yeah, my name is Victoria Tillotson. I am talent development lead at Watershed, which is an organisation that's focused on film and creative technology, which is based in Bristol, which is a city in the southwest of England.
Brilliant, thank you. And my colleague Juan is sharing links in the chat, so hopefully they'll come through for you. I'm going to do a brief introduction to this session, perhaps set the scene, so hopefully this will get us in the mood. We've got until 6 p.m. tonight for this conversation. The three of us have presentations of around 10 minutes each, based on our work. Then we'll move on to a Q&A-led conversation from about 5 p.m. And I look forward to your questions. Please use the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen to submit yours, and I'll try and get through as many as possible. If not, I've got some questions in reserve and we'll keep the conversation going. To introduce the session from my point of view, practices of artist selection have come on leaps and bounds over the last few years. And I think this is based on the acknowledgement that there's in many quarters that the time, effort, labour, and emotional investment for artists in applying for competitive opportunities is really untenable and unsustainable. At the same time, artist selection is about identifying an individual or individuals to receive support, often through competitive processes that are set up by institutions and can be really difficult to negotiate. It's often been a system of control by institutions or those with privilege to hold on to power, curating programs that they want to see, selecting the artists that they like to get the financial reward. And I think this session is about finding ways to rethink this so it can be fairer, more equitable, support artists coming from a variety of different backgrounds, locations, no matter what their financial or their personal circumstances are. So in rethinking it, there's questions of how you can disrupt these power imbalances between the selector and the artist. There's also practical questions of how much time does it take for an artist to apply for an opportunity, when especially it's more often unpaid than paid. There's questions about the accessibility of the opportunities from formats of guidance, language used, and the support available from those that are offering the residency or opportunity. There's also enormous questions around the equality, equity, bias, fairness of selection processes. How can you balance subjective experts selection with prioritizing fairness, transparency, and positive action to address ingrained issues of underrepresentation in the arts from those who are disabled, from the global majority, and from working class or lower socioeconomic backgrounds. I realise that there might be some jargon in there that we can unpack, but trying to get at the kind of systemic imbalances that we're seeing within artist selection. On the flip side, there's also questions of how resource-strapped organisations, often with overworked teams and no budget at all, can run artist selection processes that kind of have the highest values embedded within it. And then I really believe that evaluation is interconnected with this. So how do you know that your process is offering the better opportunities for artists, that they are clearer to apply for? How can your organisation run them more smoothly for everyone's benefit, yours, the artists and partners? How do you know the value of the impact in residencies when the outcomes can be intangible or long-term? How do you gather, reflect on and present information that is useful for a variety of audiences? If you can't mute selection processes, and I'm totally interested in this, how do you know that they worked, and how do you know what to keep for next time? I'm not sure we have any sort of bullets on this panel today, but I think we've tried a number of things between us, and we look forward to talking about them. I'm going to ask Victoria to speak first, and then Valentina, and then I've got a few things from my experience of working for Gel with Arts and also for my first couple of weeks at ACME.
Great, thanks, John. I'm just going to share my screen. 2 seconds. Right, okay, there we go. So this is Watershed. Watershed is a fantastic place. Well, I think so anyway. It's the only multi-screen cultural cinema in the Southwest and one of a few places outside London where UK audiences can engage with a year-round programme of world cinema. Watershed is also a world leader in art and technology practice and home to the Pervasive Media Studio, a research space that we opened in 2008, which is founded on an ethos of collaborative innovation. We currently give space to over 190 residents and have a rich network of over 450 creatives. There we go. This slide just shows a kind of range of different spaces that are within the building and outside of it. Our annual funded artist residency programme offers 2 practitioners financial, critical and technical support to develop artistic ideas that use creative technologies. These can be new ideas or works that already exist. Our aim is to create supported space that carves out time for artists to be experimental. We place no pressure on outcomes. Our emphasis is on process. We support people to test ideas, gain feedback from the Pervasive Media Studios community of practitioners, and learn from failure, which is a really important part of the process. We're there throughout, helping, connecting, suggesting, building, and shouting about their practice. The next couple of slides just kind of shows a range of artists in residence, just give you a sense of the kind of things that people get up to. Our residencies planning is cyclical. Each year we evaluate what worked in previous years, what could be improved, and any new ideas that are coming from the sector or the community of artists we support. Our main areas of focus for evaluation are understanding what motivates people to apply to our opportunities and what are the barriers to applying, like applicant experience of the selection processes that we put out there, participant experience of the residency process and the support they receive, participant opinions on how Watershed represented them and their work during the residency. If there was an adequate level of care from Watershed, this is a really important part of our evaluation. Whether the residency made a difference and if it will have continued value. And then one of the things we always really try and find out from people at the end is the things that people would like to happen next. Because one of the things that we do is like we have these quite short residencies, but then people are invited to be an ongoing part of the community. And we often continue to help people beyond the residency process, gain extra funding, connect with people, be part of the community. So a lot of the relationships end up being like very long-term from a residency start. We develop trusted relationships with the artists we support. So I think people feel generally able to provide frank feedback to us when we ask for it. And we also make sure we act on that feedback. Most of the time, this means tweaking our processes, but sometimes we do try and make larger change. So I did want to talk a little bit about one of those larger changes that we tried out recently. So we recently tried a large change to our selection process, inspired by the work of Jerwood Arts, who'd use random selection to determine the recipients of their one-to-one fund. We were aware that artists spend a lot of unpaid time applying for residency opportunities, that there's a real emotional labour in applying and being rejected from opportunities, and that many application processes are weighted towards those with certain skill sets, such as an ability to communicate complex ideas in ridiculously small character counts, which tends, for example, to favour those who are neurotypical. So we decided to trial a random process. This involved a short expression of interest form, which checked applicant eligibility. The other thing that it did is it really helped people to understand what kind of residency was being offered, and so that people could self-define whether this felt like the right opportunity for them. From the people that put in the short expression of interest form, we randomly selected 12 applicants. Those 12 applicants were paid a stipend of £200 to complete a proposal and have an interview. We also had a conversation with each of them before the interview to tell them a bit more about the programme and answer any questions that they might have around developing their proposal. The expression of interest form took on average 7.8 minutes to complete. We received 272 applications, which is triple the amount we usually receive. In previous years, 74% of applications came in on the last day before the deadline, and 20% of those applications were received at unsociable hours, which we put as kind of between 10 and 6. And with the new process, only 17% were submitted on the last day, and only 12% were received at unsociable hours. And that 12% spent 7 minutes ticking boxes. Artists are often juggling practice, paid work and family life. Knowing that people had more easily incorporated this process into their daily lives and had not been forced to lose sleep to find time to complete our application really felt like a win for us. We did evaluate the process. Most of the feedback was positive, even from those who were not selected. People felt the process was respectful of their time and the residency seemed more obtainable for those with less of a track record. The process also felt more accessible for those who found traditional application forms challenging. We did receive some negative feedback. Some felt their ideas were not being valued and that we were not taking the process seriously. And we took this feedback really seriously. And it does suggest that our current process is still flawed and signals that we have work to do in communicating the reasoning behind our decisions and the respect that we have for those who participate. We don't feel like we got everything right, but there is a sense that experiments like this are a step forward, even if the details aren't perfect yet. I'm excited to share that if you're interested in learning more about random selection, in collaboration with Jerwood Arts, we have just written and published today a random selection how-to guide. It gathers together learning from a number of brilliant cultural organisations who've recently used random selection to allocate funding opportunities and other resources. It shares the kind of learning pitfalls, things that they feel like are successful, which hopefully gives something to kind of for people to build on. The publication is free to download, and we hope it will help others to rethink strategies for selection processes. Thank you.
Should I go? Should I go next, John?
It's good next, yes.
Okay, do the same, share my screen. Okay. Great, yes. I wanted to start talking about evaluation with some definitions coming from some of the theories of evaluation. So starting far, and then we'll narrow down. The first one talks about evaluation as a systematically gathering of empirical data and contextual information, answering questions such as what, who, how, and whether and why, with the aim of assessing a program and implementing changes. I love this definition from Carol Weiss, who talk about evaluation as the opening of the black box of programs, and how theory-based evaluation has helped opening this black box of programs. So with black box, Carol Weiss meant the space that sits in between input and output, and so to paraphrase her words, it's full of theories, and the work of the evaluator as the opening of the box. So this is on the screen a screenshot of an evaluation report that I work on for a bursary program at Space Studios in London, when myself and the team try to open the box of the project. I use a theory-based approach, theory of change, which I believe a lot of us are familiar with because it's very common for us organization to have their projects, programs frame around theory of change approach. In the case of Artist Awards, the evaluation was at the end of the project. And we had some questions, evaluation questions that we wanted to answer, and we decided on some methodologies that were a mix of quantitative and qualitative. So we had a survey for the artists that were part of the project. I carried out a range of interviews with them, one-to-one interviews, and also I ran a focus group for the team and other stakeholders involved in the project. we had outcomes, as we all usually have in projects, and then I wrote a report. We tried, we had a range of insights which then were implemented by the team. So it was all a useful process. One of the things I wanted to not necessarily apply to this project, but we had we wanted to be careful about that. We didn't want evaluation to be a number crunching exercise, as it often we hear this term in the sector, especially applies to when we are, for example, in the case of like running an open call and wanting to collect data about the demographics of the artist. Are the numbers enough? What else can we say? Can we gather? What other data can we gather about the complex experiences that happen throughout the program? So this leads me to being a frustrated evaluator. So I've experienced that feeling in my practice sometimes. This is the title of a chapter actually that I co-wrote with Dr. Maya Makni from the Guildhall School of Music and Drama. It's part of a resource called Disrupt Toolkit, which is available as a PDF. Is co-written resource by various organizations around the UK who do work with communities, have a social engaged practice, and is all about rethinking hierarchies, as John was talking about, and power structures within the sector. So in my chapter, Maya and I talks about an evaluation methods, ask many questions, which are still ongoing, about how to shift those hierarchies through evaluation. And we talk about evaluation methods that are co-created and also creatives as sort of alternative ways of carrying out evaluation alongside traditional methods. So these are some of the sort of key ongoing questions that you find in the chapter that also I ask myself constantly in my practice. So how can the values and process of work created in partnership become integral to and also be questioned by evaluation? What does meaningful evaluation look like? And how project statistics, so numbers, to put it in a simple way, can coexist with more complex, subjective, and also jointly created methods and research. How can methods tell more complex narrative of impact, of change, and the values they are present in a project, in the experiences of artists. And how can we talk about impact in a broader way, and also, very importantly, in a more radical way? In my previous slide, I had a point about instrumentalization of culture, which is something I think about a lot, is widely debated in academia on how, to summarize it, how culture and the art sector, culture has been instrumentalized by politics a lot, and how whereby there is this dynamic where art organization needs to demonstrate the value for money and social impact, and in order to support their business models, and how evaluation plays a part in that, in sort of this instrumentalization and this dynamic that is going on, that applies to the UK, probably to other countries as well. And so this is a brilliant quote from a researcher who does a lot of work around creative and research and evaluation methods, which is called Helen Cara. And I put it here because I thought it was brilliant and really summarizes what Maya and I think about in our chapter, and what I think a lot about in my own practice. So traditional methods might fix and limit. With traditional methods, we mean methods such as interviews, focus groups, surveys, so most of social science, traditional research methods. So my fix and limit a meaning in a reductive way, while creative methods can more accurately reflect the multiplicity of meanings that exist in social context. This can lead to methods being creatively layered to produce richer and more insightful data than interviews or the associated methods would do alone. So in the chapter, you see there are a range of for the chapter, we interview some evaluation practitioners who have developed, co-created and also creative evaluation methods. And in the chapter, you'll find a step-by-step guide on how to implement them in your project, in your organization. So there are many examples of creative art-based and also sometimes co-creative methods that can be available to use. For instance, in my work, I've been using Cards on the Table, which is a brilliant method that was developed by a group of artists and researchers, and is essentially a card table game whereby people involved in a project, including artists, team members of the team, possibly funders as well, can come together, sit together and play a card game where the conversation is led by the cards. So it's a very interesting way of having a group conversation. And another one is graffiti walls, which is a brilliant way to gather data on an ongoing basis as we go along in the project, in the residency perhaps. So as I said, yeah, creative methods allow to review more complex narratives, and an interesting approach could be to have some suitable creative methods alongside more traditional ones, where more traditional methods are good to capture data about specific project outcomes. And also how creative method can be a great way to think about those hierarchies in the project. So who is the selector, who is the applicant? Those roles could be shifted through a creative method, for example. In the chapter and also in my thinking, you find some new visions for theory of change. As we probably all know, a theory of change is a linear framework where we have input, output, outcomes. But what I've been thinking about is whether this, instead of being a linear framework, whether theory of change could be a more circular, circular and messier framework where outcomes, where co-creation and sort of participation from all different stakeholders, including artists, is an ongoing element of it, and artists are involved also in defining outcomes and shaping them as the project runs. Finally, just a very quickly, just want to touch on this idea of failure and reframing failure. There was a brilliant project that finished recently called the Fail Space Project. It was funded by HRC. It was a research project that asked the question about how the cultural sector can be better recognized and learn from failure. From the Fail Space project, there have been a range of outputs. One of them is a toolkit, which is available on the culturalvalue.org.uk website, and where there are lots of tools that can be practically used in your evaluation, can help sort of framing evaluation through the lens of failure and our relationship with it. This is a brilliant quote. I thought to put it there. I wanted to share it because it's very interesting how we can reframe failure through the lens of creative risk-taking. Finally, just a few points. Rethinking evaluation as an evaluation that is embedded rather than evaluation that is, as often happens, an add-on task of a project. How evaluation, as I said previously, can support this shifting of hierarchies when it comes to the role of the evaluator, how to shift that from being the expert to instead having a co-created process where all stakeholders are involved. Important element, paying artists and stakeholders who are on wage to take part in evaluation, which take us to the point, time and money, the importance of allocating time and resources to evaluation, which is absolutely key for meaningful evaluation. Also, how to present evaluation beyond the report, which we all have to do, but that by evaluation could also open up for more interesting ways or creative ways of talking about how things went and the experiences for people, and who to share evaluation with, and what, as Victoria said, learning from evaluation and taking it on board. How can evaluation hold us accountable? One more point, creating methods and talking about accessibility of evaluation as well. How, for example, a creative method could open up for a more creative process, evaluation process for different people. And that's it.
Thank you, Valentina. I got a message in the chat to say that there was a lot of sound on my end. I hope I've got rid of it now. Let me know if I'm unclear at all. I'm also just going to share my screen. As I was saying, I've just joined Acme as its head of artist support. I'm literally 2 weeks into the role. So my presentation is going to focus a lot more on my work for Gerald Arts. Gerald Arts is a UK-based funder. It funds artist development in all shapes and forms, including residencies, but also bursaries, project funding. It funds organisations to run programmes to support artists, but can also work with artists directly. It worked with anywhere up to 200 artists per year, either directly or indirectly, and perhaps 40 to 50 institutions at any one time, had a turnover of around £2 million per year. So it's a privileged funding organisation, but perhaps not the largest one in the UK, and certainly not in the world. Its focus was across art form and across the UK. From 2018, we started making changes about how we approached selecting artists for opportunities. And would we have taken asked one to share my presentation for me? And I'll keep on talking at the same time. I'm sorry about this. Back to Gerald Arts and what I was doing there. Attention to artists' needs was always core to what the company did, but we started to change how we offered opportunities to make them clearer, fairer, and more transparent, because of the heightened awareness of how disempowered artists are, especially those from marginalised backgrounds. I can see the presentation is up now, so Tuan, if you could go down to the third page, I think it is. That one. Great, thank you. So we tried a number of different things to shift this kind of power balance between us as a funder and the artists applying for those opportunities. The first one was recognising that often in artist selection processes, you get a direct organisation and some other so-called high-powered individual who and make all decisions, and it would be very much a curated selection. That's the kind of archetype that we were trying to get away from. So what we had was a pool of over 80 established artists, curators, and producers who we called upon in paid capacities to help us with the decision making. So we empowered them to make decisions about who we funded. And it was, the benefits were huge because it increased trust and confidence amongst applicants that their applications would be read by people that understood their practice and their ideas. We also gained in that Artist Advisor group a huge group of advocates for our work. It was like the best public relations thing that we could have done. We overhauled the guidance materials that we put out around an artist opportunity. So we worked on making the applications use really clear language. We made sure that the deadlines for the opportunity and selection were really clear. We described who would read the applications and how they would be scored. We provided a comprehensive FAQ section as well to anticipate questions that would come up. We also produced guidance in different formats, and this is becoming very widely done now, that you get guidance in audio format, easy read, and we produce it's in different languages as well. We provided lots of applicant support. So besides putting out guidance, we made ourselves very available for artists to approach us for advice and guidance. We ran webinars like this, answering questions. We offered one-to-one sessions and to give guidance on how individuals might position their application. We also paid for access support workers to assist applicants with disabilities to make their applications. It was, again, a great thing to offer, widely appreciated, and the take-up of it was lower than we had imagined. So actually, I thought it would be a big budget drain, but actually maybe only 1 or 2% of applicants took it up, which is perhaps surprising when I think most populations have those that identify as having a disability are around 20 to 25%. We also started using data to inform selection, and I know data when it comes to artists and creative selection is a bit of a dirty word, but it really helps kind of show up our kind of biases and our assumptions when making decisions. So the team undertook bias awareness and anti-racism training. And then we, in the application process, we looked at the demographics of the total application pool. And then we checked in at shortlisting and final selection to make sure that we had balanced the decision-making throughout, so we didn't throw out any particular group of applicants. Obviously, when you get down to the final selection, you're left with a small group and you're perhaps selecting just a few individuals, but at least if you've got all the way down to the final selection, maintaining representation, then the likelihood is that the final selection will be fairer, but also when you're looking at projects and programs over years, you'll see a shift in the kind of fairness and representation in your selection. We also did a lot of learning and reflection. So Gerard Arts is a slightly unusual funder in that it had a private source of income, but also works in partnership with other funders and partners for opportunities. Having said that, outside requirements for evaluation were quite low, but internally we wanted to become that organisation that can constantly improve. So we had a constant cycle of evaluating what went well during our artist selection processes, what didn't go well, and then fed that back into the next one. So we constantly changed things. I think where we came unstuck was when we tried to change too many things at once and weren't unsure about the cause effect of if we marketed the opportunity in a certain way, did it actually produce the result we wanted? And that leads me on to marketing opportunities. So really this is looking at that demographic information or that kind of previous information about an opportunity that you've run. Has it reached who you intended it to? And then targeting marketing to reach people by developing really good networks of peers and organisations, artist-led groups, artist support networks, really reach out to them and develop good relationships with them so they become your advocates as well. But what we really found was that nothing beat in-person connection and spreading words. So we always saw a bounce of applications from a city or a region when a member of staff had visited it and met people and perhaps spoken at an event. It is that kind of being out there present that really shifted the way that we could reach out to different groups of artists that perhaps were underrepresented within our application and selection processes. The other thing we did was pledge to feedback to all artists that requested it. And this might sound completely overwhelming, and it certainly did take a lot of work. But what we found was only 50% of artists actually requested feedback. And we could spread the feedback process over 3 months or more, saying that that was what we were going to do from the outset. And again, it was really good public relations. It helped us to explain how the decisions were made, gave some feedback on the application, and allowed us to give some advice on what the next steps would be, what artists can do in terms of their next steps around projects, the idea for the opportunity. There were some dangers of feedback loops where we gave feedback to an artist, they applied for the next opportunity, they didn't get funded again or supported again, and then you get into a bit of a cycle there, but that was quite rare. I also wanted to say that we experimented with different selection techniques. So during the pandemic, I worked with colleagues on a fund. So Tuan, can you, yeah, great, thank you. So we, during the pandemic, I worked with colleagues on a fund called Live Work Fund, which drew inspiration from universal basic income. It was a big subject of conversation, artists receiving a steady salary per year as a baseline for their work. It feels like still a nice idea, but economically quite challenging to implement. But we tried an approach where we offered grants of £20,000 to artists to sustain their practice during the pandemic. And the inevitable happened in that a large number of artists applied. We had 1,283 applications for 33 grants, and that led to a success rate of 2.6%. Managing expectations was almost impossible around that situation. And really that led to us looking at different techniques to rethink how selection or opportunities could be positioned, how selection could be made so it was more sustainable and transparent and fair for artists applying for it, and to increase the chances of getting the support. So we use nomination and selection processes quite a lot over the last few years. So this was where we worked with a pool of expert nominators, and we chose them according to both their art form expertise, but also their the representation that they brought with them in terms of how they would be looking at applications. And we gave them a tight brief of what we were looking for, and they nominated artists that they thought would be really well suited for the opportunity. And that meant that we could work with a small group of artists, invite them to apply. Lots of artists wouldn't consider applying for these kinds of opportunities before, but the mere fact that they were nominated and we reached out to them kind of inspired more confidence to apply for that opportunity. We were also able to, because we were working with a small group of applicants, we could pay them for their time to make applications. So the big conversation is application making for opportunities is unpaid, and that's for a number of reasons, including because normally there's too many applicants to actually pay. So by working with smaller pool, we could actually pay them for their time. Downsides is it's a closed process, and many artists were disappointed not to be able to apply for it. So we had to set expectations around it. And also, as Victoria said, we tried a random selection, and there's a huge amount of material on Gilwood Arts' website around our thoughts, feedback, valuation of that, our particular trial on it, which if you're interested in random selection, I'd suggest you read the handbook we made with Victoria, but also have a look at the materials on Gilwood's website. My personal reflection on random selection is it's a good way of giving out small amounts of money or resource to people where it entails fairly low stakes. But if you want to introduce like positive action into making redressing kind of underrepresentation, or you want to make some kind of decisions about quality of work and potential, then it might be a selection method that you consider with some other type of approach. So you might use random selection in either long listing or to help with the final decision making once you've got a small group. But otherwise, distributing small amounts of money or resource, it's a really great way of working. So now I'm at ACME. So we've got a lot of activity going on. As you might have heard already in the conference, we support over 800 artists a year across 15 different sites. So the majority of our support is long-term tenancies, and for that we've got a waiting list of artists wanting to take up the studio. So when someone vacates their studio, it's on a first-come, first-served basis. The second example up there is a two-stage selection process for the 5-year tenancies that we've got to the Forest Station, which is one of our buildings in East London. It's a live-work studio, so it's really sought after kind of affordable space for artists to spend time. And the two-stage process is we ask artists to apply. We look first at their application according to the need they set out, the financial need that they set out within their application. And then the second stage, the final selection stage and the interview stage, is around what step change would this residency give to their practice. And just briefly to mention research and valuation that ACME does. So there's a lot underway, but I really wanted to mention the annual tenant survey. And the research was published just a few months ago, and it had some really eye-opening information about the artist population we're looking after. And it's particularly eye-opening on how the cost of living crisis, like all costs are going up, rent and energy and food, obviously, both in this country, but all over the place. And it's really eye-opening how that is affecting how artists prioritize paying for their studio space or accessing their studio space. Nearly 75% of the artists responding to the survey indicated they were struggling financially. So this kind of information will help us to improve how we offer support to artists in the future. And the final slide is a few links to different things that I've mentioned throughout this. Great. That's me. If I could invite Victoria and Valentina back onto the screen and off. Turn on microphones. I was hoping to start this if anyone has any questions at any time, do pop them in the Q&A box in the bottom. I do have some questions to get us started, but we'll swap quickly to any audience questions that come up. So I wanted to ask you both that the premise of this session is about rethinking selection and evaluation. And we've already touched on questions of power and balance and fairness and equity within artist opportunities and how we review and evaluate artist opportunities. I wondered if you could reflect a bit further from your experience why you think there's a need to review these practices right now in 2023. What feels really urgent for you right now in this conversation?
Okay.
Go ahead, Victoria.
One of the things that I was kind of thinking about in response to this question is that I feel like there is there's been a big recognition in the arts and culture that there needs to be greater equity and opportunities. And I think, you know, there is a lot of opportunities that go out that have a kind of statement in them around we welcome applications from, and then a kind of list of underrepresented groups. And I think a lot of people maybe design opportunities which respond to reports and kind of data that's kind of coming in around underrepresentation and, you know, what needs addressing. But I kind of feel like there's a lot more practical things that can be done. I think just having that statement in an open call is great, but I think there's more that can be done. I mean, the random selection process is just like one example of a way in which, like yourself, John, and Watershed, and a whole host of people that we interviewed in the publication that we've just shared, are kind of thinking about responding to that challenge. But I think there is more ideas out there, and I think like now in 2023, people kind of rethinking those practices and finding ways to share them with each other and listening to what artists need and feeding that in, you know, coming up with ideas but sharing it with people before you do it. One of the things that we did before going ahead with the random selection was a process called consequence scanning. It was a process that we kind of learned that .everyone put out. There's loads of stuff on their website about it. And it's a way of kind of looking at the potential consequences of something before you do it. It's like a really brilliant method of kind of thinking through, actually, if you do something, what are going to be the kind of possibilities, possible way that things will unfold as a result of that action. Actually, it's a really brilliant way of thinking through something before you do it. So sorry, I've digressed slightly from the question there, but I kind of think that there is like more that can be done, and I'm really excited to see how people are going to rethink more and share that out.
I think also there's a lot more emerging selection techniques that can be experimented with. I've seen other models of peer selection where those applying for the opportunity also the selectors within that opportunity, so they get a vote or they get a kind of a casting choice of who within that group, and that's a kind of very much a peer-led selection model. There's also another UK-based charitable foundation called the Joseph Rowntree Foundation that does a lot of local grants in New York, and they use a grant committee drawn from local residents in New York. So it's the community choosing the awards that will benefit their town, their location, and I think the role ways of how do you change who the decision makers are. Valentina, from your point of view, why does rethinking feel really current right now?
Actually, very similar to what you just shared, you both of you have been talking about, in a very similar way of like shifting the hierarchy of who selects, who is applying for things, who is selected. I think that applies to evaluation as well. So who asks the questions, who answers them. I think a similar shift is much needed in that area as well. And I've been reflecting, I mean, we all know, as you said from the tenant survey of ACME, artists are struggling financially, and this has been an ongoing situation for many artists. And so I'm going there because what I've been thinking is that artists are very much so in the context of opportunities. I feel like artists are very much in this very disempowered position and very passive position as well, where they are there, they're applying for an opportunity, they might get it, they might not, they might change the course of the practice. So in a kind of broader way, how to shift that, and how the evaluation can support this shift. So looking at, as I was always saying in my presentation, looking at ways of doing evaluation that is not, the end of the project, data collection, but is something much more collaborative from the start with it, as you said, John, with artists being involved in selection or in the design of the project, of the program, of the opportunity. So very much shifting the role of the artists, who are not just the people who are applying for the opportunity, but the actual designers of the opportunity, the active actors within the process, which includes evaluation as well, which where I believe in you mentioned that has been very interesting to use data in your processes. And I think like there is a power in those data collection processes, and there is a power in the way those are done that can really shift some of these dynamics. So yeah.
A follow-up question, Valentina, because often evaluation or good evaluation is considered right at the start of like any strategy. Even it can start possibly months, if not years, before an artist is selected for an opportunity. So if that framework has been set, what ways, once an artist has been brought on board, say to a residency, might they be included in how they can give feedback? So it still serves what the organisation needs, but so that they feel like they're being, it's a conversation that they can engage with on their terms, and they're giving the feedback that they want to on, for example, this hypothetical residency. Does that make sense as a question?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I would say that, for example, if you think about theory of change, right, which is the framework that is often used, and the way that works with a the linear sequence of things. So this happens now, and then this happens now, and then maybe we might get to this point where the artist's practice is impacted in these ways, etc. So I will completely change that, rethink that, and involve the artist throughout it. So from the start. So, and the opportunity to do that could be, also very simple way, like a group session, or I recently seen that, for example, the cards on the table tool that was being used as part of a meal with people taking part in a project. So having these like communal moments where not necessarily you having like a session for data collection, a session for feedback, but it's much more sort of organic. It's part of the whole. It's part of being together as well. Like being part of the project all together, and really valuing those moments of conversation, interaction, also informally, and that I think is evaluation as well.
I think those moments of communality, food is such a leveler, such a great way of bringing people together, and you can often have informal conversations that you or get feedback that you wouldn't be able to get feedback otherwise.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in a very informal way and relational way, really bringing in the relational aspects is so key in this context. So and yeah, so really, so that is evaluation. I think that's from the way I see it. Yes.
Out of interest, how would you go about then recording that so that you can use it for, the week after or the month after, or
it could be a way, for instance, of doing it is maybe a member of the team, or more few members of the team could have the role of the observers in that particular moment, and then can make notes maybe just after the activity or during the activity, but in a very informal way. If you wanted to do it a bit more formal, that recording it's another way, just like asking people's permission and recording what gets shared in that specific activity. For instance, that's something that in the cards on the table sessions we do. I do just simply recording it with a recorder and going from there.
Yeah, good advice there. Victoria, I was wondering how you work with your artists on residency to gain feedback from them, and what kind of evaluation work you do around your residencies.
Yeah, I think a lot of what Valentin has been saying resonates actually a lot with the way in which we work. We often do evaluation of the selection process. It was quite interesting with the random selection because we had 272 people applying, but only a very small number of those actually filled in the form. But one of our goals had been to kind of reduce people's emotional attachment to the opportunity. But I think maybe the flip side of that is that if somebody's kind of not, they just filled it in, it was 7 minutes, done, gone, oh, I didn't get it, move on. They're less likely to kind of fill out a form around evaluation. I also think we made a mistake in the fact that our evaluation form was a lot longer than the actual expression of interest. So we did get some feedback that our evaluation form was too long, which was quite funny, but actually really great feedback, because because I think places that we made mistakes with that is that our evaluation form was too long, but also the other thing that we did was that we put out too much information for people to read beforehand, because we were kind of like, oh, we need to tell everybody everything about this so they can make a decision about whether this is the right opportunity for them. But actually some of the feedback we got was it was just too much information to read to fill out a form that took 7 minutes. Do you know what I mean? So again, it's like thinking about actually, what do you actually need to communicate to people so that you're not taking up too much of the time, but you kind of sort of gets back the thing that you need, whether that be them understanding what kind of opportunity this is, or them filling out a form with enough information so that whatever decision needs to be made can be made. Then filling out the evaluation form with enough information to give you something to actually like loop back into what you do next time. So it's kind of an interesting balance in terms of like how much you ask for against what's needed, if that makes sense. Could
I come in there, because what you were saying really chimed with me. We put out so much information about our random selection opportunity because we were really excited about it, and it was, you know, one of the first kind of trials of it. And we commissioned tests from artists on what they thought about it, and we wrote blogs on how we put it all together. And we also gave an evaluation form for artists afterwards. And the feedback was roughly split into thirds of people that absolutely hated that we were using random selection and couldn't get onto it. People who, another that just couldn't care less what we were doing and just wanted to apply for funding, and whether it was an algorithm or a panel, they didn't mind. And then another third who were super interested in it as a kind of a geeky kind of way to make selection fairer. Yeah, so it was, I think our excitement around the innovation was not necessarily matched by the artist's interest in it.
I completely get that. I think we had a similar thing where the section in the middle are the ones that didn't send back any feedback, and it was the people who felt really strongly like it's the best thing that they had ever seen, and the people who thought it was the worst thing that they'd ever seen, who filled out the evaluation form. So but the feedback that we got was so useful, and will help us think about, you know, what we do from here on. I don't think I answered the other part of the question though, which is like how we build feedback into the process. So I guess just to kind of quickly summarize is that we do an evaluation like survey at the end, so that artists who've been through the residency process, we ask them like a clear set of questions, which I kind of outlined in the presentation, beginning the sort of areas of that, what that is. But we also have continual check-ins with people throughout the process really regularly, which is around idea-based development, but it's also around like how they're doing, how they're feeling about it, what needs to change, so that we can kind of dynamically adjust what we're doing or make the connections that people need, or whatever those things are, you know, so that people feel comfortable and able to develop their ideas in the most kind of constructive way for them possible.
I think it was striking in the panel earlier that Cheryl was talking about action space, which was with artists with learning disabilities, and the fact that she was in there day after day, week after week with the artists and residents and Barbican Arts Trust to get that feedback but address any issues as they arise during the programme, rather than wait until the evaluation is done and dusted. That kind of live monitoring of the project is both time intensive, but in order for artists to get the most out of an opportunity, especially if they have a high level of needs and support during the time on the programme, that kind of engagement really, and that kind of feedback loop mid-activity is really important to just leap on things and fix things where you can, rather than letting artists get dissatisfied with the experience and then have to find out months later in your evaluation and feel terrible that you couldn't have solved it. I guess that leads me onto a question to Valentina about that kind of live monitoring of projects, and if in your experience as an evaluator, how you might work with an organisation to do that, especially if you're on a freelance contract with someone. How would you set them up to be doing that kind of monitoring of the project as it's going along, to kind of catch issues in real time and make adjustments?
Well, yes, one way will be to have an evaluator on board or throughout the project, but that's quite a luxury, I suppose, budget-wise. But yes, one way would be that, to have a very much like a person dedicated to that. It could be the server at the session, it could be the one collecting data, or someone who will be part of the team. Another way, so that doesn't necessarily have to be someone external, it could be someone in the team who could have that dedicated role of being the observer. Essentially, that would be a good way. Another way, which would be a creative method, could be like a blogging or what is called graffiti wall. So having, for example, doing sessions or doing like specific moments throughout the residency, giving the opportunity, having the space for feedback, for reflection together as a group, and that could be done creatively as well. For example, through drawings or writing, creative writing, depending also, that could be led by the artist as well, depending on what the practices are. So various ways. But I really like what Victoria said about having constant check-in, because essentially it's having that very much sort of caring approach that is very valuable, I suppose, and how to create a space for that and in a also accessible way, and that's where also creative ways of doing it that could come into place as well.
Good advice, thank you. Again, to our audience, if you've got any questions, please do put them into the Q&A box at the bottom. Otherwise, we'll keep on chatting for about 10 minutes and let everyone get on. Victoria?
Yeah, sorry, John. I just thought about another practical tool that we sometimes use, which might be useful for people in terms of gaining feedback, because we do have that approach, like what Valentina was saying, in terms of like care and building a kind of trusted relationships with people so that they can be kind of frank and honest with their feedback. But sometimes we run residencies which are more kind of intense lab style, maybe week-long programs, which often involve a kind of group of people who don't necessarily know each other beforehand coming together and collaboratively making things. So it's about kind of being experimental, sharing practice, but it can be quite intense. And with those kind of things, what we often do about halfway through is create what we call like a worry and concerns box. So it's usually just like a kind of cardboard box that we've cut a slit in and try and decorate with paper to make it look nice. But it's sort of a way that people, because I think oftentimes people kind of carry worries or concerns, but they think, oh, I'm the only one feeling this and I don't want to say it out loud. So it gives people a space where actually, we put it out in the morning, and then in the afternoon, we kind of look at what people might have popped in there anonymously during the day. We kind of, usually it's just on post-it notes, and get them out on the table. And a lot of the time people are just worrying about the same things. So we can kind of group them together and then just have like a really open conversation around the table around what those concerns are and actually how we can address them, or things that we might be able to do. And actually it's a really useful way of addressing those kind of like evaluative questions in the moment, so that, because I guess evaluation is about finding, assessing the value in something. And so a lot of the time, I think when people are developing creative projects, they start off really, woo, it's all great. Then in the middle, it dips because it all gets a bit stressful, because things aren't working. They're trying to do this, trying to do that. I can't think too many ideas, need to hone it down. And then it like comes back up to the end to something brilliant. So that often there's like that creative dip in the middle. So it's like catching that creative dip and saying, it's okay, don't worry about it. Let's get those worries out there and see what we can do about them. So that's kind of another thing that we sometimes do to kind of dynamically gain that feedback and help people like refine the value in something for themselves.
Yeah, I love that. I love the idea of catching a creative dip as well. It happens, especially during longer projects where someone runs out of steam or inspiration, and you need to, loses kind of engagement with the organisation, and they need kind of picking up again. We've got a great question in chat from Stuart Mays, which is, can you say something about the possibility of slow evaluation? As an artist, I sometimes want to give feedback after the organisation has ended the evaluation process. Who defines timescales? Really great question. Valentina, do you want to take this one first?
Of course, yes. I like slow evaluation, like the term. I guess sometimes timescales are hard defined by when do you need to report by. I think that's often the reality, but potentially evaluation could be carried on for a long time, because experiences have, you talk about that, John, at the beginning, about like long-term impact, long-term value of a residency program that can manifest with time. So I think there should always be an open channel for providing evaluation. So it's from the organization to keep that channel open, I suppose. There could also be a choice, sort of programmatic choice, that an organization could make of doing evaluation after a certain amount of time, after the end of a residency. So, and a sort of more longitudinal evaluation in that way, which could be very valuable, maybe after a year and after the end of the residency program, and then that could produce a lot of interesting insights. It could be interesting to have maybe thinking about some different a range of touching base moments.
I think that long-term evaluation, that slow evaluation, is always what organisations strive for. And then sometimes they get busy and move on. And I can really feel that question and feeling like, oh, they moved on and they've kind of forgotten, or I don't know when to drop that feedback or that question back in. I mean, the reality is that a lot of programs happen because they've got funding, and that funding has a reporting deadline, which is often a couple of months after that program ends. But that doesn't mean that the organisation goes anywhere. They still persist, they continue, hopefully. With my Gerald Arts hat back on, I think I was always really pleased when an artist got back in touch with me a year later, 2 years, even 5 years later, saying that residency I did back then had this, I learned this and it meant I could do this and it resulted in this 2 or 3 years later, or I started working with this person and this conversation led to that, to the other. And that kind of thing is, I think, what we're all here for. It's the unexpected outcomes, it's the slow burn outcomes that I think I certainly want to hear about a few years later. And there's that fear that you lose touch with the artists that you've supported, that you want to hear back from. But the other, I'm talking about good feedback. There might also be bad feedback that you've been sitting on for a long time. And I'm thinking particularly about some kind of more dramatic experience that might happen during a project, that you might not feel empowered to give feedback in the moment or even shortly afterwards. But I think it's absolutely the organisation's responsibility to hear that feedback at any point in the future. So I think it's incumbent on the organisation to be available and open to feedback, no matter when it comes. The ability to respond to it, I'm not sure, but yeah.
Definitely, I think something that could be useful in regard to that is going back to the fail space. Some of the really practical tools they developed through that project are brilliant to allow for that space for negative feedback. So framing the evaluation through the lens of like possibility of failure is actually very interesting, and it could be done in through like can be done through those tools, or like through like the organization could create a space for that in a way as well, that the artist doesn't have to, sometimes giving bad feedback might be perceived as risky, or put the artist in a vulnerable position. So I think that's important to think about how to instead allow for that space to be there available.
Victoria, did you want to comment on that?
I was going to, echo a lot of what you've already said, to be honest. I think sometimes evaluation processes are tied to funders, but I think at Watershed, what we do try and do is create those kind of long-term trusted relationships with people. So I feel like if people probably did have something they want to feedback later on, then like we have a kind of ethos of like, openness and transparency. So I would hope that people would know that they could come back to us with feedback. And often, if we're thinking about something, we'll go out and have a conversation with people that have been through the programs before to see what they think about a new idea. And that process as well can garner feedback that may be something that's been like milling around in their minds or whatever about their experience when they went through it. So those things do happen. On some of the bigger programs we've done where we've had kind of funding to have like larger external evaluation, which has kind of ended in a like big report. A lot of the time with those, we would, when we've come to the point of being ready to publish that, obviously we share it with people as we go along, but we host a kind of session with people that participated to kind of look through it collectively and have a conversation, a reflection and a response to the sort of key learnings that are covered in the report, and where we go from there. So I guess there's a few different things that we would do, but I love the idea of slow evaluation, and I think it's really important because often it is afterwards that things come to you, because sometimes when you're in the moment, you're like, I'm doing this, it doesn't always hit you immediately what you really kind of think about something. So I think that building a slow evaluation actually is a really great thing that we should all be doing.
Yeah. We've got a few more minutes. If there's any final questions from the attendees, please do drop it in now. One might have just come up. Sorry, my mouth doesn't work. Okay. No, there is another question there. I just wondered if anyone has any kind of final thoughts either about artist selection or evaluation, any top tips, any insights into the workings of selection meetings, any thoughts coming forward?
Probably something I covered in my presentation. To be realistic, that evaluation needs resources, so it really needs the time. Time needs to be intentionally put there for that to happen. That will be my top tip.
Yeah, I guess in terms of evaluation for me, it's kind of really understanding why you're evaluating something, and also being prepared to kind of act on that feedback that comes through. And and thinking about that, like sometimes that's kind of short, medium and long-term things that you can do. You don't have, it's not always possible to act on all the feedback immediately, but so being realistic with yourself around what's actually possible, and thinking about if there's anything that's come through that you can share back with artists or the sector that will be useful for other people, because it's what, like Valentina says, there's a lot of value in failure, and we shouldn't be scared of sharing failures, because actually failure just means that you've tried something and it didn't quite work, but you probably learned a heck of a lot through doing that, which is really valuable. So I'm all for sharing that kind of thing. How about you, John?
Yeah, so I was thinking more around selection, and it's that this isn't a radical new thought, it's that question of who isn't in the room. And I mean that both on the selection panel, so is the selection panel and people involved, are they representative of the communities that you're trying to reach with the opportunity that you're running? And also who isn't in the room in terms of who's applying for the opportunity, having really good look at the demographics of who's applying, the art forms of people who are applying or not applying, and going, okay, if we did this again, who do we want this opportunity to reach out to? Yeah, I don't think those are radical thoughts though, but yeah.
They're important ones though, very important.
Absolutely, yeah.
Would 2 minutes go? I think I'm going to draw us to a close if that's okay with everyone. I wanted to thank our attendees for sticking with us over this last hour or so, and I wanted to thank you both, Valentina and Victoria, for your time today, and thank you for the conversation. I hope the attendees have enjoyed the first day of the conference and will join us again tomorrow with another packed programme. But otherwise, I wish you all a very good evening.
Thank you very much.
Bye, thanks.
Bye, everyone.